I'm here, my brother. Graffiti. I'm glad you could spend some time with us this evening rather. So EZO, before we start our conversation, I'd like to read off a bit of your biography to folks who are joining us now. And so as it goes, Joseph EZO Whippler was born in 1963 in New York City and raised on the cusp of traditional Puerto Rican spiritual culture, parallel to the cynicism and spectacle of modern American city life. Seemingly, this initial experience formed the creative foundation from where his work thrives and overflows. Nonetheless, another positive force was the move to Vienna at age 6, living with his family in Vienna. And even though the war was over for 25 years, EZO was sensitive to the fingerprints of its recent history, as well as the late 1960 vibes of rebellion. This duality of receding old world sensibilities and the immediacy of the new possibilities were clearly evident to him, even at such a young age. EZO attended the High School of Art and Design and then went to the School of Visual Arts, where he graduated with a BFA in 1989. EZO has been exhibiting artwork since 1983, and most recently is exhibited at 13 CVG Gallery, Art Basel, the Grand Palais in Paris. And EZO, his work has won the acclaim of the Brio Award in 1993, earning him a one-year residency at Longwood Arts Center. And EZO's work has appeared in the motion pictures Pinheiro, My Brother, Don Quixote, and on the Netflix series Jessica Jones. So you have quite an established career as a fine artist, and I would like to explore this with you and our guests. So welcome. I'm glad.
Thank you for having me.
So, EZO, given that historically your work has always had a political slant, a political commentary, and a visual commentary, very powerful visual commentaries. How are you seeing what's happening now with the Black Lives Matter movement affecting your work? How are you responding to it? And how's it affecting you on your day-to-day?
Well, it's I see it as a continuing dialogue of an error that was never corrected. You know, this country was built on a shaky foundation with slavery, and that wasn't corrected when it was supposed to be corrected back in 1776 when they built the country and wrote the Constitution, and they left out a big group of Americans. A big group of Americans were not part of that and were not brought to the table. So we are now paying that price today, and I'm hoping that what's happened the past week, the looting, of course, was you know, horrendous, but it was part and parcel of what the problem is. And I think that people will listen now, and hopefully this will change, you know, and we're looking at a positive outcome to all this. How it's affected my work? It's always affected my work. You know, I've grown up with this. I grew up in Lefrak City. Then I moved to Harlem. I've been in New York my whole life. So the race issue, the police brutality issue, the disparity of class in this country has been a part of my life all along.
Let's discuss the police brutality issue and your work. One really controversial collaboration you did with Dred Scott made a lot of headlines, and I will let people know it's a very graphic and very powerful presentation we're going to show. Tell me about this presentation and how you guys decided to make such a controversial statement about police brutality, and also that was rather suggestive in terms of retaliation against them.
Well, this occurred about a year or so after Rodney King in L.A., and of course Larry Davis and everything that's been going on in New York and LA and in the country at that time. So Dred Scott is a political artist He does primarily installations and so forth. And I had been working with all along at that time, doing my Malcolm X murals and my Martin Luther King murals across 110th Street. I really just went from end to end on 110, doing these giant portraits, Mumia and so forth. So Dredd contacted me. He said, "Listen, we got this a show at the Civil War Memorial Arch in Brooklyn, right by Prospect Park. There's the actual arch upstairs. There's a gallery. It's actually quite beautiful." And he wanted to do this installation, that incorporated graffiti murals, these mannequins, these headless mannequins with the policeman uniforms, headless and armless, and these Molotov cocktails made out of 40-ounce bottles of beer filled up with gasoline with the flames and so forth, and that was done as you went up. There's a spiral staircase that goes all the way up to the gallery, and in that staircase we had set up this installation, and there was a loudspeaker with that sounded like riots in the street, and there was a takeover, like a civil war situation.
What's, if I could interject, what's powerful about this image we're looking at with the loudspeaker is like you're met by 3 African American figures, and one of them in the center is pointing a gun at you.
Right. And that's as soon as you come up the stairs.
And the question is that person protecting himself, or is this person warning you? What's that to suggest that he's armed and pointing a gun at you?
Those figures, when I created those figures, my what I was feeling was that we are here. We're protecting ourselves and our families and our culture, and you either give us our respect or we're going to take it. It's one or the other. I think it got to the point where it's been at the point for a long time, and I think the American people have been really patient. I mean, they've been really patient, and I think that's initially because they're good people,
right,
and believe in the idea of America. It's just that the people running the show, have other plans.
Right, and then you have another figure with a shotgun that's blasting. It seems like he's blasting the 40. He's on the wall, and he's got a shotgun that's shooting out flames, and he's blasting the 40-ounce as to ignite the Molotov. But as you go further into the next slide, you see 2 headless corpses of police officers, one on his knees and one laying face down, or faceless down in this case. That's right. A very powerful image.
It's a very powerful image. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you understand the gravity of that, of what that means?
Yeah, it was very arresting. It was a very arresting image, and it was an image that was really made to shock. It was a shocking image because it's talking about civil war and rebellion. We're living in a country that is supposed to afford us all our freedoms and so on and so forth. And what would happen if there's a breakdown in our system? And we're seeing that right now. When you look out the window, we came really close to unprecedented. There's never been a curfew in New York. There's never been any of this. We saw a bit of a breakdown, and it was terrifying. I mean, my mural and Dredd's installation were scary and arresting, but I think it was more scarier and more arresting if it happens in real life. And we came pretty close to that, and I think a dialogue has to be opened up, and people who have not been at the table have to have their place. And, we're all Americans at the end of the day, and we have to be treated equally, not right. Just African Americans, but women and people who have been just traditionally not given their share,
Yeah. If I can read this quote, again, not to lose the message of the presentation, of the installation that you guys did, you wrote, "It took a civil war for Black people to be changed from chattel slaves to wage slaves." So it's
Correct.
important that people understand the messaging of the artist. I mean, in terms of the backlash that you got, um, what kind of feedback were you getting from the public?
Well, at that time, we got a lot of flack. You know, there was a lot of flack for this, and it's understandable. You know, because whenever you present these types of alarming imagery and you know, polarizing imagery, and the content is polarizing, but the situation is polarizing. So we got a lot of flack from veterans groups. You know, we had a van full of Korean War veterans. They showed up, and we had you know, Curtis Lee and the Guardian Angels show up, and it's understandable, you know, but it became a freedom of speech issue because you know, you're allowed to speak on what you want to speak, and art should have this open platform. And I got to give credits to the cops at that point because they had to kind of come in and protect the installation, and they did. Even though a couple of them were grumbling, but they did protect the piece because there was a lot of threats to come in and whitewash it and break up the spot and things like that. And you know, the law enforcement came in and had to stand the post and watch it. So I got to give them credit for that, and I did. You know,
If you can tell us what year that installation was done.
that was 1994,
Yeah.
93 or 94.
So this again, what I ask you that because here we are at 2020, we're dealing with the same issues. We're trying
Right.
both passive resistance, as Dr. King had suggested in practice, and then you painted this mural for Dr. King, and again, you choose a lot, like you mentioned, a lot of civil rights activists to portray in the community in Harlem. And you chose Malcolm X, who was a revolutionary and who understood that the only way to be heard was through conflict at times. So as you're, you know, as this role starts kind of forming in you to be kind of a social commentator, you know, using graffiti, kind of the medium as the message. Let's talk about this piece that you did. I believe this is in Spanish Harlem, correct? With Zephyr, the power piece, or was the Zeph piece there beforehand?
No, this was on a. This is actually still there. It's wedged between two because they built a building in that lot. So that piece is sandwiched between two buildings. So I did the power piece first, and then me and Zeph came on a Sunday because we had all that space next to it. That whole area in the side there to the left of the P was all open. So we came back and we dropped those silvers on there. We were doing a lot of those silver style pieces and taking over little lots here and there. You know, I started as a writer in Queens, silver, blacks and silvers. You know, the whole idea was to be as good as you can with two or three colors. You know, a guy like
Yes.
Part's a good example of that. You know, you give Part three cans, and he'll burn someone who has 20. You know, and that's really what it. You know, Dondi was the same way. You know, with the scraps, he did greater pieces with the scraps than he did with the with a bunch of paint. You know, and I kind of I'm cut from that cloth. Same thing. You know, you give me three. I try to do my styles with, and we did a bunch of those. You know.
And so going back to the thematically and the things that you are illustrating and painting, you seem to identify a lot with the African-American struggle, even though you're a Latino. What's the connection there in terms of Black and Caribbean identity with your work?
Well, we all come from Africa, brother. You know, that's how that is, you know, and even though we've all evolved and genetically, whatever you want to call it, that's where everybody comes from, you know. And if you're an American, proud American, then you understand that that's part of your DNA, you know, and the issues, the plight of the African American is an American plight, you know. It's not a separate issue for a separate group of people. It's everybody's problem, you know. And it's like if one gets left out, we all get left out. You know, I came to Harlem, and I was raised by my grandmother, who came from Puerto Rico, and her father was black. I came to Harlem. My wife is African American. My children are African American. You know, and it's just like I said. You know, it's an American. You know, it's an American issue, and it cannot be separated. You know, it's got to be dealt with. You know, so you're either going to take one position or the other. You're either going to be, you know, a separatist, or you're going to be inclusive. You know. It's really just two positions.
And the role of the artist at this time is so vital, isn't it? To kind of, especially interestingly enough, right now, the rise of political graffiti is kind of highlighted a lot in the news, because the people are picking up cans as well as sticks and bottles and all kinds of protest signs. But the power of the spray can is clearly evident now in terms of what commentary is going on in the streets. Here we have this EZO piece with, it seems like you took on the right hand side of this mural on this wall. You did a caricature of President Trump as the Coppertone baby, and another figure, I don't know who that represents, kind of.
That's Putin. That's Putin pulling down his panties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about this and bringing this to the public, and where was it and what year was this?
This was in 2018. This was at Wellington Court in Queens. I don't know if it's still there or not. And I don't know if you're aware of Wellington Court. Wellington Court is it's a mural project out there in Astoria. Yeah, it's great. It's run by Allison out there. And listen, this guy's he's like fodder for comedy, you know, only that now it's not funny anymore. You know, it's kind of turned, it's gotten dark, you know, with him, because he's inept and he's self-serving, and he's got there's a whole list of problems. So this was the first one I did, and the second one, the one with the Coppertone. So I used popular culture, you know, Ghostbusters for this one, and in the other one I used the Coppertone girl. I grew up looking at, you know, a lot of political cartoons in National Lampoon, in the New Yorker. You know, I looked at all of that, even Playboy. Yeah, I looked at them for the cartoons. There's a great history of that, you know, of artists commenting on culture, on society, on all of that. And I've always tried to bring that to my work, on either whether it's on walls, whether it's my studio work, or whether it's illustration or whatever it is. I definitely, that's part of my creator DNA. I looked at those guys, and those guys kind of, the way they handled it, I kind of like that.
So let's talk about your graffiti history, because you grew up in Queens, and you said that you started writing in 1979, and you were up by Regal Park, Queens. You were a BMT writer
right.
Initially, right? In those years, you had a lot of famous writers from that area going up in Queens. Also, you had mentioned too that you became part of TPA, the Public Animals, which was a really well-respected crew of writers out there with Fuzz One and others. Let's talk about that. Yeah. How you got into writing and then connecting with these legendary writers like Fuzz.
Well, I grew up in when I came back from Europe, I was living in Regal Park, and that's by Left Rack City, right across the street, Junction Boulevard. And there was no graffiti around there. There's just like these tags, these really cryptic tags, Snap 5. There was a Torch One piece in a little park over there. So, and I didn't know anybody who wrote, but for some reason it was intriguing to me. Like, who are these people writing on walls? Why are they writing on walls? I didn't even know how it even happened. And I ended up, I went to art and design because I wanted to be a comic book artist. That was really my goal, an illustrator. I landed in art design in '78, and there it is. It's ground zero. Everybody's there. There's graffiti all over the walls. Everybody's walking around with black
Who did you
books.
meet in art design in that period?
Well, there was Peebo Parn, who was on the fives, Fade, TNT, who the Shirt Kings, Days, Chris Ellis, Doze was there, Conan, Albert Popa, who was a great seven-line writer, very underrated. You had Foam, you had you had a lot of guys in there. I mean, there were guys that weren't even hitting trains and they were doing black books. And I was introduced to the black book, so I was looking at a lot of Gene 13. That guy was like the main guy. His stuff was amazing. And I started seeing. Then there was a fella who wrote Dune, No Comp Boys. So he was bringing in his books, and in his books I was seeing Roto and Snack and all of these guys who had that pipe style and that great throw up style. I mean, amazing letter styles. So I just started looking at that, and then I spent like the whole year just drawing in books. And then around it was in '79. I went to the 7 yards with Conan, and that's how I really started. That was my first time in the yards, and then I went to the yards in the 6 yard up in Pelham, hit that one time, and then I was out of art design by '80, and I ended up in Newtown, and that's when I meet Joey, TPA, Flame, Fuzz One, Chazar, and then later on from that, I meet Angel Duster and all the guys out from Corona, and that's when I really started bombing. I was bombing with those guys.
Right. So, given that you were from Queens, you were primarily a throw-up writer, correct? Not a style writer.
Yeah, a lot of that. A lot of just getting up. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you got to art and design, that's where you started realizing, okay, there are a lot of good style writers here, and you started getting into style pieces.
Actually, it was in reverse.
Was it?
When I got to art design, it was all about style. It was all about pieces and tagging and just being a stylist. When I got to Newtown, it was about getting up. It was about volume. It was about bombing. But there were guys that, for example, when Fuzz came to Queens, I think in '77, he kind of changed the whole style of Queens, and he brought the Bronx style to Queens, and people were just emulating that. So I was still looking at a lot of his stuff. So the idea was to create a good throw up. The idea was to have a good, unique, stylized throw up that you could put up fast and get up with, and that's what I developed. But I was doing pieces also. I was doing a lot of handball courts. I was doing a lot of buildings, highways, and stuff like that, doing little styles here and there. At that point, I was living up in Forest Hills, so I was doing pieces up there, up in Halsey, up in Forest Hills High School. That was really the spots where I was doing pieces. And then on the trains, I was doing just mostly throw-ups, a lot of throw-ups.
You also had a period where you were doing some street art, or so to speak, or wheat pasting. And here we can see on the right and the left some of your wheat pastings on the Brooklyn Bridge. You bring it back to the street. You always brought it back to the street. You had a balance between studio practice and the street. What kept bringing you back to the street?
Well, my friend Rev's got a great term. He calls it greed feedy. He says that a lot of guys fall into that. They forget about the street and they just want to make their bread. And I don't subscribe to much. Actually, I like that term, greed feedy. It's actually funny. But I kind of feel like it's got to be 50-50. You gotta pay your bills. You gotta eat. But you also need to remember where you come from. You understand?
Right.
Like this, my boy Wayne, COD. He's a great, prolific artist, and that's really what it is. You have to remember where you come from. Exactly.
And this slide that we have in this slide, and talk about remembering where you come from. In this slide, we have you coming back to Spanish Harlem, to to the Graffiti Hall of Fame, and where, of course,
Right.
Hart and Dez and many legendary painters painted. You would
Right.
paint there for a few years, no? Yeah.
Yeah. So when I came up to Harlem, I was painting. I started doing walls again. I kind of like stopped from '83 to '86. I wasn't doing anything, and then I hooked up with Sharp, and we were doing walls here and there, and then like Shaker and Class and Part. I linked up with him, and then around 1990 we started doing a lot more work, and then in '90 we're always talking about doing the Hall of Fame just complete in one shot, because people were doing pieces there all along. You know, there was always Tats Crew was in there, UW was in there all the time. FX, I don't think FX was there yet. I think they come later on. Per and those guys were more with Tats Crew at that point. TC5, FC, everybody was coming and doing pieces, and then people from other areas. And then me and Part were talking about let's try to do it in one shot. It took a while, and then in '96 we were able to, you know, I talked to the school and they gave me the permission, and I got everybody together, and we did the first full Hall of Fame in '96, and then we did it in '98, and I was there until about 2000, and then I just got involved with doing music and doing my studio work, and Part kept it going, and that's where it went, you know, and it's become an institution now, which is great,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And you still remain in that community, right?
Yes.
As I understand, you have your business there, your Botanica.
Actually, I'm not. My Botanica is in Midtown. It's in Hell's Kitchen. My boy, yeah, Roz, TC5 Fun Club. This is his shirt. Yeah, I've been in Hell's Kitchen since '96 with my business. No government loans, no government bailouts, just pure sweat, you know. And that's how it works, man. You either make it or you don't. So yeah. The Saints have been looking out. That's what's been looking out.
I want to show people these works. Just a picture of this work of yours, that collaboration with Revs. For most people that know Revs, he's a welder, a sculptor, and also a prolific bomber in New York City. Tell me, how did you guys decide to collaborate and you know, think about doing these? I would imagine this was an illegal public sculpture.
No, actually, I meet Revs through my boy Peak. It's my partner. We did a lot of street work together. There's Peak right there. What's up? And the way that happened was around 2000. We started, you know, doing music, and then Revs came on the scene. He's a musician as well, so we were playing for a bit, and then from out of that, he was doing his sculptures and he was doing his rollers and all his work. Great work, really underrated. And he said, "Hey, listen, let's collaborate on this piece." So he was working on this sculpture, this idea, and then he wanted me to paint on it, and that's how we hooked it up. We kind of worked on that for a couple of weeks. He chopped it out, and he had a shop out there in Brooklyn, and I would come in. I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks painting time. I did that all with oils. And it's called the 5-Finger Volition. That's what I called the piece, 5 fingers. And then I knew.
This is all Corten steel, or steel mat, I imagine.
It's all steel. Yeah, all steel, all chopped out of. I think it's 1-inch steel. The plates in the street, man. He cuts those out. They're amazing. He's an amazing sculptor. So I knew Ken Kaliba Gallery over on 3rd Street, and they have a sculpture garden. So I contacted them, and the thing with Revs is like whenever he wants to put something out, it has to be permanent. You know, he doesn't want any money, he doesn't want anything. He just wants his stuff to be permanent. And so I contacted the gallery, and they were like, yeah, I'll bring it to the garden. And it's still there. So that's on
Excellent.
3rd between B and C. It's a pretty good piece, man. It's really heavy. We had to bring a
Well, one of the
giant,
things I've
giant
known,
truck to get in there.
yeah, one of the things I've always known about you is the diversity in your talent and how you use your talent, whether it's painting or sculpture. And even that series you did with Mass Appeal, you did these illustrated pages for them, which,
Yeah.
and they'll be hard to read on screen for people. But again, this goes back to the influence of illustration and comic book art for you, but also political satire. And some things, that people might find objectionable. Again, you don't seem to hold back your tongue on issues, especially
No,
political.
it got me thrown out of that magazine, as a matter of fact. That's really what happened. I did that, I think it was from 2004 to 2007. It's a good strip. So that was in the middle of the Iraq War was going on. Bush was in office. Same bullshit that's going on today. I think the difference between then and now is that it was, he was a better politician. He was more subtle with his bullshit, as opposed to this clown we got right now. So we're still dealing with the same problems, and initially, the strip was a one-page gag reel, so I started out as just graffiti writers, the trials and tribulations of being a graffiti writer, racking, trying to get laid, all the nonsense, or rather just day-to-day living, doing pieces, getting chased. And then I progressively started to just see what's going on in the world, man. And I started making these comments, like this particular piece on the right, that was about, at the time, the internet was becoming more prevalent. And I was making a comment on that. And a lot of commentary about the war. Then I started just commenting on Dick Cheney, the way the policy, the
So
way the
is that what got you
war is
kicked
being
out?
handled.
Is that what got you kicked out?
I don't know what it was. What it was, it kept I started getting warnings from them about, you're getting a little too political. Try to tone it down. And I couldn't tone it down. I mean, it was just too much you couldn't really tone that down. It's just, I try to make it funny. They are funny, the pages, but I really couldn't
Yeah,
tone it
I mean,
down.
but
And
you could see how people would take offense to some of this stuff because they're rather graphic and somewhat pornographic at times too. That really mocks the things that are very sensitive to Americans, like the Statue of Liberty, having
yes,
her, bent over and George Bush and Cheney behind her. That's and again, there are images that are rather shocking. They have a high shock value.
yeah, yeah. But there's a hypocrisy as well, because in that same magazine, they'll have tits and ass all over, and supporting drinking and all of that behavior. But when it comes to related to political commentary, then it starts getting, they don't want to talk about it,
Right.
So you have to be able to talk about everything. And again, I looked at, later on, I started looking at a lot of underground comics, a lot of those guys like Robert Crumb, Richard Corbin, Mobius, guys like that. And those guys were really graphic, and they were really, Dave Sheridan, the Freak Brothers, the Leather Nun, those kinds of books were really well illustrated, but the content was really, really graphic. But I found it to be very truthful. There's nothing wrong with sexual imagery, or I think it's more horrible having somebody come back from a war with missing limbs. I think that's horrible, and not being supported. A Dominican immigrant goes and joins the Marine Corps, and or a Mexican immigrant joins the military, comes back, and he gets deported. I mean, that's disgusting, that sort of thing. And that has to be addressed. that shouldn't be happening, you know, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with talking about it. You know, that's how you
No.
solve problems, you know.
Well, problem solver is the revolver, as they say. And in your images, they're so provocative, and particularly these two different paintings that you did with armed Rottweilers. So now this must be
Yeah.
your id, right? This is partly your ego, possibly alter ego, illustrated. But you know, of course, the issue of violence permeates in your work. Tell me why the Rottweiler, and what do these paintings symbolize to you?
Well, animals have always played an important part, you know, in my work, particularly dogs. I mean, I love dogs or whatever, but they also are, they call them our best friends. They're our best friends. In a lot of ways, we are animals ourselves, the human animal, you know, and we take great pains in trying to hide that or ignore that. But it's in everything we do, you know, and I think the violence is a regression to that state. You know, we're in a constant war with ourselves, right? We're fighting our animal instincts, and we're trying to raise our consciousness, you know, and that's really where the war is. The war is within us, you know, and trying to calm that animal down and not letting that take over. Yeah, and that's basically what the animal is. And the weapon of choice is the pistol. Those are all images, you know. So I load a lot of my work with images, with images that are arresting, they're triggers, you know. But ultimately, I think all artists are trying to elicit a reaction from the viewer. You know, you don't have to agree with me. You know, I'm just showing you the world through how I see it, you know, and we might be in accordance, or we might be on opposite
Right. But
sides, and that's fine.
Joseph, more pointed. I mean, you're very pointed against America, right? The American flags show up in your works more, you know, quite a bit. And these two paintings are rather interesting to me. They're very powerful. And one is their collages. But the one that you have here on the left with the American eagle and the writing on top in red that says "America Repent," with a human figure seemingly hanging half torso upside down as if they're being tortured. Now, these paintings are suggesting trauma, that you're carrying historical trauma, because the one on the left with the American flag and the figure, all you see, headless figure rather, with his back and his arms crossed in the back as if he's handcuffed, and a kind of blurred image of a Taino icon, perhaps, and you have some writing on the left hand side, Grito de Lares, which was the
Right.
uprising in Puerto Rico, right? So
Correct.
this anti-colonialism message, right? That, again, bringing everything back to historical context, you know, meaning one towards Puerto Rican history, and the one on the right possibly to Guantanamo.
I lost you there.
So again, these two paintings suggest to me two different histories, one from Puerto Rico and one possibly from Guantanamo.
Well, the piece on the left, which is Grito de Lare, and that's Atabex, the figure you see, the pictogram on the bottom, is a close-up of the goddess of Puerto Rico, who protects Puerto Rico. Her name is Atabex, you know, the mother goddess, which all cultures have, you know, whether it's, you know, Lakshmi in India or Yemaya in Afro-Cuban religion, Santeria, or the Virgin Mary in Catholicism. That image keeps repeating, and that image is talking about not only the rebellion of Lares, but also the colonialism that pretty much has destroyed that island. You know, look at the state of Puerto Rico today. I mean, it's that shouldn't be even happening, and that's a good example of a kind of a racist policy, you know, and the billions of dollars that island has incurred is, you know, the Jones Act that doesn't permit that Puerto Rico to import or export directly. Has to go through Virginia, has to go through Florida. Puerto Ricans have to pay extra money to get their goods, and that's where it happens. You know, those types of things are the issue. The piece on the right is actually, it says thief repentant, and that's a rooster. So actually, I was actually talking about with that piece on Peter, you know, the disciple, you know, who betrayed Christ and in essence betrayed himself. And it's a piece that talks about, you know, betrayal and then redemption, you know, that we have to deal with, not only as a nation, but as individuals, you know. The issues with this country is not so much that I'm anti-American. I'm a pro-American. I'm an American, you know, and we have to fix America, you know, and it has a problem.
As an artist, you feel you have a responsibility to that?
Yeah, I think all artists have that responsibility. That's our job, you know. And if you look at even Goya, you know, Francisco Goya during the Spanish Revolution in Spain, you know, the atrocities of war, his drawings. He was the first photojournalist, basically, but he was doing the drawings of what was going on, you know, and that's our job. You kind of have to do that. It's hard to ignore, particularly that when the problem has become so giant. I mean, it's just been ignored and to the point where you can't ignore it anymore. It's a cancer, and it has to be dealt with. You know, just like if you get sick, you know, you have to go to the doctor. And that's where we are right now.
Can we talk about this slide? It's interesting. It's an assemblage, and you have it's like wooden panels, and one of the bigger panels, it's kind of a figure of a woman. And you see several breasts and some figure, but also you have kind of the star, not the stars and stripes. You have this seemingly American flag noted, but with a Nazi symbol on it. And
right.
What tell me about this installation and why choose this imagery that's so potent and alarming?
This particular piece was called Pax Americanism. So it's like Pax Romana, right? Peace of Rome, you know. So this particular piece is about how the United States is the new Rome. We are the new empire, right? But that's why I have this particular, that dog figure you see on the right, and you see the two children at the bottom, Romulus and Remus, who were the first kings of Rome, who created Rome, you know, and they were supposedly nursed by a she-wolf, you know. But I also use, you know, ideas from popular culture. So that, like the movie The Exorcist, you remember that movie, you know, when the demon appears, he's that stone figure with one paw up like that. So that's reminiscent of that. Actually, there's a few things from that movie that I've used in my work, you know, the fighting dogs in the desert, this particular image. And then on the side, on the left, we have an image of, it's a kind of a morphing image of the Virgin Mary, and then you have this upside down crucified figure as well. That's at the bottom. And then the center panels, we have an American flag with the Nazi symbol. The middle panel has a little portrait of Jesus Christ, and then the bottom has a woman smoking a crack pipe, which were all issues that, you know, we're dealing with right now. You know, how we have the drug issue, which is to pacify a population, so the population doesn't really know what's going on, and you kind of keep a whole group of people either asleep or just destroyed, you know, and this is what this piece is about. You know, it's dealing with these kinds of issues. I never really saw it as a race issue. It's a culture. It's rather a class issue. You know, it's a class of people that are kept underfoot, just like we talked in that particular piece with the installation of went from chattel slaves to wage slaves. That's what it is. You know, it's a country of wage slaves. You got an iPhone, you got your 2-week vacation, you think you're good, but it's not good. Look out the window, you know. And that's really what I'm talking about with these particular pieces. It's opening up a dialogue. I think an artist doesn't have the answers. I could only pose the questions.
So I have a
That's what I
question.
do.
So let me pose a question to you. You do these works. Are your intentions uh, just to exercise your creative right, or do you have an interest in having your work in a gallery? Because I know early in your career, you did show at a prominent gallery like Sydney Janis, but that was the first taste you had of commercial, uh, uh, exposure for your artwork. But these works, do they find that same kind of audience and curiosity with the gallery world?
Well, there's a place for everybody, right? I mean, you know, there's galleries that cater to all kinds of images. I mean, you're an artist, you've been in the gallery scene as well. You know, there's collectors that collect 18th century horse paintings, and there are people who collect street art, and there are people who collect graffiti. And there are people who collect graffiti, but they don't want graffiti from 1980s. They don't want anything after 1989, you know? So there's a niche for everybody, you know? You can't be in any gallery. You can't be in every gallery, you know. And I think when you're talking about galleries, you're talking about a business. You know, these people are, you know, selling work. They want their cut, and you get paid. Now, there's some folks who have a hard time with that. You know, I don't. You know, I'd rather get up in the morning, do my paintings, do my walls, get my coffee, and be able to pay my bills that way. You know, I don't particularly cotton to having to work some beat job and then paint when I got the time. I've done that, and it's not a lot of fun. What I do these days, I sell out of like Mr. Ewok says, I sell direct, you know, right out of my studio. People want my work, they come purchase it, you know. I'll sell my work through my website, and the people who collect my work, they'll come and buy it, you know, and exposure like this, people see it, maybe they want to buy a piece, that's great. The gallery system is a system like any other, whether you're selling oranges or sandwiches or paintings, it's the same kind of deal, you know. They want to get their cut, you get your cut. And
let's go back to you. We were talking about the Cine Janis experience when you were a kid. Tell me what was your introduction to Cine Janis Gallery back in those days in the 80s, early 80s?
Well, that's really how I got my whole bug in just being more of a painter and exhibiting my work. The way that happened, I stopped writing on trains in '83, and I then started doing canvases, and because that's what was happening at the time. I always wanted to be an artist, so I continued doing that. And I was working at the time at Latin New York Magazine with Izzy Sanabria, and that's where I first started getting my illustrations published, and I had my first comic strip and things like that. And I still had my connections with the writers who were my friends, because back in those days, as you know, a crew, you not only painted together, but you hung out together, and you just basically chilled. And I went over to a good friend of mine was Fuzz One, who was someone I looked up to and appreciated his work and learned a lot from. And I had taken some canvases over to see him, and he was like, "Hey, we're going to meet Dondi. We're going to go downtown, and we're going to take some canvases down to this gallery." So I went with them. I went with Dondi. Showed up, and he was very generous with sharing, you know, his resources, man. And he took me down to 51X, and that's where I met basically the old RTW crew, Revolt, Zeph, Futura, and everybody was there. And then I showed my work to them, and Futura was, again, very generous, man, and said, "Hey, go take it up to Cine Janis, talk to Carol Janis. He's looking for work." And they directed me in that direction. So the graffiti community at that time, you know, it could be very polarizing, but, you know, once you got to know each other and and you painted together or you hung together. It was very tight, man. It was like a family, you know, and it was always this mentorship. The older writers taught the younger writers. That's how you learned. You know, they taught you about style. They took you to the layups. They took you to the yards. They showed you how to rack up. It was passed down. It was generational, you know. So I owe really a lot to Futura, Don Dean, Fuzz One, guys like that who are older than me, Joey, you know, TPA, another one, you know, guys who kind of showed me the ropes, you know, and that's how you do it. And then you show the younger cats, the guys who come up behind you, you show them, you know, and that's how it's supposed to be.
Exactly. And so as we start winding down, I want to talk about this series, because you did a very interesting series that, of course, evokes quite a lot, right? You know, your piece, but it has this kind of, I don't know, nerve system around it, and an image of a young black child looking up, and then another one with a skull with roses on the right-hand side. What do these symbolize? What is that in that kind of nerve center symbolize?
Well, those are actually arteries. So my concept was arteries. The arteries are in your system, your circulatory system, and I was kind of connecting it to how the roots of a tree, you know, the eternal roots of a tree, and how we're connected to our ancestors, and then we'll be further connected to our descendants through our DNA, through our blood, literally, you know, and that's what that symbolizes. Now, the piece on the left is a portrait of Elegua, Eshu, which is a Mercury, fate, destiny, chance, and the figure on the right is the same deal, chance. It's all about fate and chance, and you know, you'll be ready when luck looks at you, and you look back and you take your opportunity, you know, and it's really about that, connecting with kismet, connecting with your destiny, you know, and being ready for when that opportunity appears, and you got to take it, you know. And this particular series, a lot of it had to do with that, you know. It was about ancestors and the future, the past, and how we're connected, how you're just a word in a conversation that's been going on for a long time, and it will continue, you know. And I look at art that way.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the word EZO, the name EZO, is painted in the background, right? Tying history, your graffiti history, the aesthetic of graffiti, and then all this other stuff, right? The recall of this ancient history. So EZO, in the last 5 minutes, I want to invite everybody to ask you questions. So if anybody out there has a question, whether it's Wayne or Ewok or KMS, please feel free to ask EZO a question while we have him in the closing minutes. And EZO, of course, I want to thank you for spending time with me. And of course, we spent time together when we had the studio up on 23rd Street, which Alan had arranged for us.
That's right.
I got to give him a big shout out, because in those years, he was very supportive of us and Alice Mizrachi and others up in those studios on 23rd.
Yeah, Mr. Kent's a great man. He's a great supporter of the arts, a great supporter of my work and your work and everyone, man. He's definitely an important figure, man. Big ups to him for that, and the museum and everything, and Alice, beautiful Alice. She was great.
Alice, yeah. So
hooked us up with that trip down to the Miami, right, to Basel. That was great.
Yeah. What did you think of the museum? What was your first reaction to it?
Very proud. I'm very proud that it's there. I'm proud of what you fellas have done, and the young lady as well. You guys have done, Allison. You guys are doing great work, you know, and we need more of that. We need more of that, and I think everybody should be supportive of the museum. And if they're in Miami, go check it out. You could donate, buy some work, It's
Yeah,
important.
by living artists' work. So I have a question from KMS. Like always, do you think hand styles is important in the in graffiti? And can't you please redo the PG-ism wall with peak again?
Hand styles very important. It really, like, I gotta say, man, there's some guys out there that they're getting up, but they're not getting up with style, you know, and style is very important. Getting your tag down is key. You got to have a few different ways of tagging. You know, a great guy to look at, OE3. You know, that E that's almost impossible to copy. You know, and he had two ways of doing it. And another guy, you know, we talked about Fuzz One. How many names he had? 20 names at least.
He was amazing. He was
amazing.
He was definitely a legend and beyond his years, for sure. So
yeah, he would just carpet bomb with tags. Like, you go inside of a train car and he just obliterate it. No room for anyone, you know.
So EZO, this last minute, I want to thank you again, as always, for contributing to the culture, for being a prolific painter and supporting us here at the Museum of Graffiti. And I just want to give the people a heads up to visit our website, www.museumofgraffiti.com. But also join us. Tomorrow we're not broadcasting, but on Wednesday we have Mimi from Few and Far, Women's Collective, which is pretty amazing. And then on Thursday we have Os Gemios joining us. And then on Friday we have Neon from Berlin, style writer from Berlin, joining us. So as we continue, we're trying to expand this dialogue, right? You and I come from the mecca of all of this, which was New York City, and this is expanded beyond our reach. But everybody has their own experience through it. So in engaging with them, we bring them a bit of the past, people like yourself, and then bring more contemporaries from other countries, which is important. So again, I want to thank you in the final seconds, and a big shout out to you in New York City. I hope you guys are staying safe, and until next time, check in on me.
Thank you. Take care, my brother. Great talking to you.
I appreciate you, Joe. We'll catch up later.
Alito, take care. Peace.
Take care.